Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today, me and my co-host Mark, we discuss the math versus the habits when it comes to nutrition. In my personal opinion, I believe habits are way more important. It is way more important that you look to have greens in every meal, you look to have a good protein source in every meal, and you start to make better decisions throughout the day. We talk about the 80-20 rule, we talk about different things that you guys can apply to your own life and to your own diet to hopefully help you achieve your goals. But without any further ado, let's get on with the episode. So, for some reason it's coming across like, right, so it's that bit. I got it.
Fixed it?
It took me a while.
Took you 9 minutes.
I started just pressing random buttons, and now my voice sounds better.
Well, either do that or give it a whack. That usually works, doesn't it?
Turn it on and off.
Yeah.
BT engineers get paid a lot to do that, you know.
I know, right? Maybe that should be the job that I do.
What, just go and turn things on and off?
Yeah.
I go around to my granddad's, and he's like, oh, I can't get onto Netflix, so I can't do that. So I literally just go around, reset the router, and he's like, oh, you're amazing, gives me a tenner. Fuck, it's tenner a time, mate. If you give me and a coffee.
Got any neighbours?
And a good coffee's like £13, like £3. So that's a good 13 quid I'm walking away with there.
Absolutely. Profit.
I have a black coffee because there's very minimal calories in that.
Very true.
Very minimal calories.
Very true.
And as long as I track it, everything's golden.
I don't have black coffee because I don't like it.
You don't like it?
No.
Do you track for your milk?
I can't really say that I don't really track so much anymore, I don't think.
Well, let's get into calories. Let's get into tracking. Let's get into kind of the arguments between them, I guess, or like the difference between, I guess, the math and the psychology when it comes to tracking calories and if it fits your macros, bro.
Protein, bro.
Protein, bro. Protein water now as well. They do protein water.
There, mate.
Yeah.
I need to get me some of that. Hydration and gains.
That's trend. If any of you don't follow squat, bench, deadlift on Instagram, and you kind of would have got that joke. If you do already, then you get the joke. If you don't, then well, that you won't understand that at all.
Your loss.
Yep. So let's go. Let's talk about it. Where are we going to start?
So I think the importance of today is to identify the difference between, when it comes to nutrition, the difference between the math and the psychology. Because often a lot of people are just like, oh, well, how much protein? How many calories? And that stuff is important, but I think there are other issues that people need to focus on before they necessarily need to really consider that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So in your mind, it's the people that come straight away and say, just give me a plan.
Yeah. Like just tell me what to eat.
Yeah.
Like, well,
yeah.
What do you mean?
It's almost like telling someone who doesn't know how to drive, doesn't have a driving license. It's them just turning around and going, well, just tell me where I've got to go.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll drive there. I'll be able to do it. But like, you haven't actually learned how to drive. So you're not actually going to be able to give there. I'll give you a map if you want, but are you going to be able to follow that map, or are you going to be concentrating on not crashing? Like,
yeah, that's quite a good analogy actually. Because what we really need to do is, yes, teach people how to drive, but also teach people how to read a map.
No, but legit, and start it from the very, very beginning. Like, have you seen the video of the guy who fills a jar up with rocks?
Yeah.
and then does smaller pebbles and like grit, then sand, for example. Well, what we're talking about is big rocks.
Yeah.
We're talking about the big things that we need to concentrate on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The psychology of it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think people are very, I don't know. It's just like, let's start at the beginning in terms of people turn up and they're just like, well, how many calories should I eat? Well, to be honest, I actually don't know. And the reason for that is because, we're taking a calorie or another example. I know we're going off on tangents here, but another example is just like, oh, well, I did my BMR on Google. I'm definitely in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Right, how does Google know how many calories you need?
I literally had that question I had from a client the other week, and I spoke to him about this, so you won't mind me mentioning it. But he sent me just a calorie amount and just said, "What do you think?" Now I replied with, "I think I like cookies. I think I've had a long day at work, and I think I need to go to the toilet." Because what do you mean? What do I think? Like, having a number is just that. It is just a number.
Yep.
There is so much more that goes into working out. Like, whatever your goal is obviously separate to that. In general, you need to know that yourself. But then what you need to eat calorie-wise that goes into it is a topic again. But if that's the thing you're focusing on to start with, like, you best have something before that. You best have thought about other things leading up to that point.
Yeah, so I think, using a calorie calculator is probably a good place to start. But what people have to understand is that is literally just an equation that's going to give you a number that does give you a place to begin. But then after that, you've got to take the next kind of like 7 to 10 days to start to analyze other things that are going on to understand whether that number that you started with is accurate or whether it's too high or whether it's too low. And that's going to be based on what your body weight does on the scales, relative to what goal you're trying to achieve, whether you're trying to get heavier or whether you're trying to be lighter.
Right. So before we get, I've got a question, but before we get into that, let's just, for anyone who doesn't really understand, like, when we talk about macros, when people say just give my macros, when we talk about calories, like, what are we talking about? Just give a general understanding for anyone who doesn't understand.
Well, so a calorie is just a unit of measure. And for us as human beings, it's a unit of measure where we measure how much food we consume on a daily basis. And macros are essentially carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Yeah. So, and that's predominantly where we get our calories from throughout a day.
Right. So the reason people ask for their calorie amount is basically for a daily basis, our body through loads of different systems basically burns calories or uses calories as energy source. And we get those calories from food. So people want to work out, well, how many calories do I need to eat to basically stay the same weight or lose weight or gain weight, depending on what their goal is. So that is why people just say, well, give me my calories, because that's the easy thing. Now, for me, I find a lot of people who do that and who are good at tracking are really dreadful at being able to deal with like their nutrition when they're not tracking.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that's what's highlighted this to you, that people focus way too much on the numbers? And like, because when I said at the start, like the if it fits your macros thing, because like a lot of people just, well, as long as I know my calories, as long as I know my macros, I can eat whatever I want, and as long as it falls within that, then that's great. Yeah,
like people focus on the wrong stuff.
That's basically what we're trying to get at.
Yeah,
is that people focus on the wrong stuff. So what do they focus on? What should they focus on?
I mean, to begin with, we probably just need to, before we even start to look at things like macronutrients to a certain extent and a breakdown of macronutrients, for most clients that I've worked with, we just need to help them gain a better understanding of food.
And a better relationship.
With food. And to be honest, like that, probably one easy way that I help my clients highlight their knowledge around food is I'll just kind of, within the first week, I'll just be like, I might give them a calorie target, but it is just a number. That is all it is. It's not, it's not this special magic number that's crazy things are going to happen. It's just a number. But the idea of that first week is kind of just like, right, I'm going to get you to track. You're going to use something like MyFitnessPal or something else. And we're going to track your food on a daily basis simply because there are so many people in the world who have no idea how many calories are in certain things. So if you were to eat 1 apple and 1 banana, how many calories are in that?
So that's been the most amazing thing that I've recently started tracking. I've never tracked in my life, and I've recently started doing it because I've started writing nutrition for people and started helping people with their nutrition. And if I'm asking other people to do it, well, I best be able to do it myself and best have a really good understanding of it. And the thing that it's done for me is it's really helped me to understand, wait, that's how much chicken weighs? Like, oh, when I cook chicken, it weighs less. Oh, when I cook, do you know what I mean?
That is one of the best questions, like, I always get. It's just like, well, should I weigh my food raw or should I weigh it cooked? Well, don't matter.
The really big, you're missing the focus here.
Yeah.
The focus is consistency. If it's going to be easier for you to weigh it when it's raw, weigh it raw. If it's going to be easier for you to weigh it because for me, I cook my food when I put my container on my scales, and when I put food into it, that's what goes in. The really key thing here, don't switch between them. Don't start weighing it raw 1 week, weighing it kind of cooked.
Especially if you have rice.
Rice is the imagine weighing a sponge, yeah, and then imagine weighing a sponge when you fucking chucked it in a load of water. That's what rice is.
Rice is the best one. Just like, right, you're gonna have, I don't know, 60 grams of uncooked rice, and then people get it the wrong way around. It's just like,
I've got a week's worth of rice here. What? I had a guy do that, genuinely do that. He was like, I'm going to have 150 grams of rice per day, weighed it out, uncooked, cooked it. He was like, I've got rice for 3 weeks. It's like, yeah.
I can't eat all this in one meal.
We laugh, and the reason we laugh is because I had the same realization. Like, wait, like things change, things actually weigh this amount. Like, if you don't know, you don't know. And that is why tracking can be a really good idea. Because it starts to highlight that. It starts to give you the ability to go, I never realized I was eating that much. We all go, well, the recommended daily amount for a man's 2,500 or whatever, and for a woman is 2,000. I'm eating that.
Yeah.
Trust me, the portion sizes, especially in today's society, are so big and so kind of exaggerated. And the fact that if you're just eating, like, say you ate from like a package meal, say you, like, everything you ate was packaged up and was processed food, like, they're allowed, like, I think is it a 10% guide? They're allowed a 10% either way like that, in the estimated calories amount. It's something to do with however many grams of weight it is, depends on their percentage, but they're allowed an estimation within that. And so even if you were just tracking that, you may not be 100%, let alone just eyeballing food, like just trying to go, well, I think I'm eating this. Like, until I started tracking, you could have asked me, like, how much calories in that, and I would genuinely have plucked a number out of the air because I didn't know. Yeah.
Another good thing I've had is somebody has sent me a picture of a potato just on the side of a kitchen. There's nothing else in this picture. So there's nothing else as like a reference for size, a reference for weight, like nothing. Just a blank canvas and a potato. And it's just like, how many calories are in this? I literally have no idea. Like, I have no idea how big that is.
I'm getting a vision.
Do you know what I mean? I'm good, but like, I'm not there yet.
Someone used to say, my balls are crystal, my balls are golden, not crystal. Yeah, this is the problem. The problem with calories, the problem with having all of these things to focus on, and the reason we do it is because it gives us a guidance, and that is, like, everything is a tool. Now, you're probably, if you started listening to this, you're thinking that we're kind of slagging off people that track their calories, we're slagging off tracking your calories. We're definitely not doing that. Tracking your calories is really beneficial, can be really beneficial. But like all tools, we need to find out where it's best use is, okay, and why we use it. Like if you have a screwdriver and a hammer and you have to nail a wall, like hammer a nail into a wall, you're going to use a screwdriver, you're going to use a hammer. Which you're going to use? One has a better use for each job. Same thing goes for this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would we use tracking calories? Is it just that as a highlighting tool to start with in the first week? Obviously, in the first week it is, right? You just to highlight it to them. Yeah,
it is a highlighting tool. But then also, I mean, I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that there is a lot of talk on social media, there's a lot of talk in the fitness industry, and I have this conversation with clients as well. Kind of, you can lose weight, you can gain weight without tracking. You can do that. But if, like, based on the conversation that we've just had briefly, if you have no idea how many calories are in certain foods, how are you going to do that without tracking? And in reality, like, we can try and find as many different answers to this question as we want, but the reality is, like, you're not. So there's a little bit of conversation at the start of this podcast in terms of, do I track calories? And I don't really track calories anymore. Like, there'll be time periods throughout the year where I might dial things in for somewhere between a week to 6 weeks, depending on what I'm doing, and I might specifically start tracking my calories. However, I probably spent the best part of somewhere between 18 to 24 months years ago religiously, and I mean religiously, probably a little bit obsessively, tracking every single piece of food that I consumed. Yeah. And I did that on a daily basis, multiple times a day, for probably the best part of 2 years. And through doing that, I've gained an understanding of my own body. I've gained an understanding of roughly how much food on a daily basis I can consume without gaining weight if I'm trying to stay at the same weight, or how much food I would need if I want to try and gain a little bit more weight, or how much food I would need if I want to try and lose a little bit more weight. The only reason I know how to do that is because I spent such a long period of time tracking. Yeah. So yeah, people don't need to track to be able to achieve their goals. However, I think even if people just tracked for the first 4 to 6 weeks, they would learn so much, not just about food, but they would learn so much about their own body, their responses to food, their body's responses to food, how they feel on a certain amount of food, and all the answers to the questions that they're probably looking for.
Yeah, they are, a lot of times they're right in front of you. It's just trying to work out what do I need to do to understand, like, because if you do just get a load of numbers thrown at you, it's really difficult to understand. It's like, what does that mean? And when it comes to tracking calories, you got to ask yourself the question of, will I be able to do this for the rest of my life? Will I be able to track these calories for the rest of my life? Because like you said, Mark, like you did what, 18 months worth of tracking, right?
I reckon so.
So 18 months worth of tracking, and then now you don't track like as much?
Nah, not really. But I mean, I don't track as much, but and this isn't something I would potentially suggest people do, but on a daily basis, I pretty much eat the same thing.
But that's the same as me, right? And the reason that is on a very, like, that's basically tracking in the way that, because you eat the same thing on a daily basis, you know that, well, if I wanted to lose weight, I could just remove something, and you're probably removing something that you normally have every single day. So that kind of brings me to the point of, like, when it comes to the difference between planning out your meals and weighing them beforehand compared to tracking what you're eating. And what I mean by this is, when you have a planned diet of what you're going to eat, and you have certain grams of food or whatever, like I said, like my client who is going to have 150 grams of rice per day, and he knows what he's going to have, so he kind of makes a tracking, understands that. And if you're going to have the same thing Monday through to Friday on, like, those 5 days, then you pretty much know, well, if I weigh it all out and I put it all into containers, then that meal is this amount of calories with this amount of macros, etc., etc., etc. And that can be a really easy approach for some people. But then what do you do when someone comes to you with a cupcake and says, have this cupcake? You need to somehow try to track that to the best of your ability if you are in this learning phase about yourself, because we are so bad at not tracking. We are so bad at just accidentally forgetting to add those bourbons in, forgetting to add the kind of cupcake into our like tracker, that we forget about all of these additional added calories, the tea, the milk in your coffee, the sugars that you have in your tea. And understanding that all of these things need to be tracked is very important. So you may even have planned your meals out, but the extra bits you have need to be accounted for within that. So like you can make your life easier by knowing I have these meals, but you still need to do that additional work. Like you aren't done there if you're tracking, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Like, so I, with a lot of my clients that I work with, I'll kind of like send them some guidance around the foods that they can consume and potentially a meal plan depending on what it is that they need assistance with. But then I always say like, right, I always generally leave a good 200 calorie window for most of my clients and say, right, you have an additional 200 calories a day where you can use these as you wish. But if you have milk in your coffee, that's going to come out of these 200 calories. If you have a biscuit, that's going to come out of these 200 calories, because it's exactly that. It's those little things that people generally tend to miss, because if you're going on a daily basis and you're tracking all of your main meals, but you're not tracking the milk that goes into your coffee, you're not tracking potentially the fizzy drink that you've had, like the full, like the legit Coca-Cola, and you're not tracking that sort of stuff, it's very, very easy to clock up a good 500 calories per day of additional calories that you're not accounting for.
That's your deficit out the window.
Yeah, gone. Yeah. So it's, like be really meticulous with what you're doing. Like track everything.
So the reason we're saying this is because if you have never tracked, then tracking can be a really good idea. Starting to understand how your body works, because we can put into an equation and get what your estimated kind of maintenance calories are based on a number of different factors, but that doesn't actually account for you individually, because everyone is different, and like there is no way that an equation can know your exact calorie maintenance or because on a day-to-day basis we change. Do you know what I mean? Like we do things so differently all the time, and it's hard to kind of say, well, I'm going to eat this, this and this, or if I have these exact macros then I'm not going to lose or gain weight. It doesn't seem to work like that. And what happens after this period of tracking? How do you, I guess, go around? You have people track for the first week, definitely. Then how do you kind of go on weeks to weeks to weeks, depending on the person? I guess?
Yeah, because then we start to really get into coaching and start to tailor it 100% to that individual. Like I've had some clients who have just tracked for probably 6 to 8 months, like every day. Whereas had some people just like, they know that they maybe get a little bit obsessive over it. So, and again, that's potentially a dangerous place to be. So just like, right, we'll do it for a couple of weeks. We'll come off it. For a couple of weeks, we might go back on it for a week or so, just to kind of, or we might say, I don't know, take a month period for the first 3 weeks of every month. We're not going to track, but the last week of every month we're going to track, just so we can make sure that we are staying on top of things. Because I tracked religiously for a long period of time and now have a good understanding of how many calories and how much food I need to, let's say, maintain the weight that I'm at. But if I just eyeball stuff all of the time, it's highly likely that I'm either at some point going to consume too much food or I'm not going to consume enough food. So there might be a time period where I have to pull it back in a little bit and start tracking and those kind of things. But it then comes down to the individual, because I do like to use tracking as a tool to help teach people to understand how many calories are in food. But then there's another side to this in terms of like the whole psychological side of it that we really need to start unpicking, rather than just being, like we said at the start, well, how many calories should I have?
So that's the main point. If you're going to compare, like, if you're going to compare approaches or what diet's best for me, or should I track, should I not track, individual, like, needs, individual kind of what works for you is going to be the top answer on this. If tracking gives you anxiety, if you get stressed out about having to track your food, it's probably not a good approach for you. And if you are going to get obsessed with it, it's probably not a good approach for you. But if you are so likely to kind of, when you're not tracking, go so far off the wagon, then maybe it is a good option for you. And that psychological aspect, the part of what works for me, I'm being completely honest with, right, who am I? And if you're doing this for a client, who are they? How do they work? What is best for them? The psychological aspect's massive. There's so many things that go into it. What would you say is the biggest problem that you've come up against when it comes to clients and their nutrition? Do you have like one barrier that sticks out the most? Is there one psychological thing that really gets in the way?
Yes. I would say with a lot of people that I work with, one of the biggest problem is they are asking questions that relate to topics that are they're probably somewhere between 6 to 10 months away from needing to know the answer to that question. So what I mean by that is kind of they are asking questions that relate to the tip of the iceberg, the top of the tree, the top of the pyramid. Whereas at the minute, we're at the bottom of this pyramid trying to build a good foundation. So like they're potentially people who are currently not achieving success with their nutrition, which is why they're seeking out advice and help from a coach. And then they're starting to ask questions just like, oh, well, do my calories need to change on a rest day compared to my training day? What do I need to eat prior to exercise? What do I need to eat after I finish the gym?
Should I have protein after my training session?
Yeah, and the reality is at this moment in time, for where most people are, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. So the big rocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big rocks. Yeah. Focusing on your nutrition. What's the big rock for you then? What's your main focus when it comes to nutrition?
So for me, the main focus for most people is just be like, right, before we look at anything else, we need to look at over a week and potentially even over a month, are you consuming adequate amounts of energy? And what I mean by that, have we got your calorie target in the right place? Whether that's to allow you to gain weight, whether that's to allow you to maintain weight, or whether that's to allow you to lose weight.
Yeah. So the first thing you want to know is like, what are you consuming, and where does that put you? What position does that put you in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So total calorie content.
For the one thing that I do with my clients is I get them to track sometimes what they're currently eating, and after the first week, I send them a whole host of questions because I want to start to highlight to them and get them to start to pick apart like what is going wrong here. Not necessarily what's going wrong, but where do I overconsume? Do I eat enough veg? What meals have protein in? And highlight what have I ate the most this week. Like some people have a really weird thing about crisps. And they have like 4 packets of crisps a day. Yeah. And they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And it's not until you do this tracking process that you could maybe then turn around to, well, maybe if you have 3 packets of crisps, like that might be a start.
Yeah.
And when I say that, like you may think, well, that's like 3 packets, but those small changes are going to be the really thing that starts to get the kind of cogs turning, the wheels turning on this kind of movement that we're trying to do with people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I kind of, after I've got calories in place, I kind of go a similar direction to you in terms of just like, right, well now let's look at where those calories are coming from.
Okay.
So what are your food choices?
Your first thing is not necessarily macros, or do you still, obviously they track, if they're going to track calories, they may as well track macros at the same time.
Yeah, I still give them guidance on, where they're going to get those calories from in terms of a macronutrient breakdown, but that's quite loose.
And they could, look, I guess what you're saying is, has that all come from McDonald's?
Yeah.
Has that all come from takeaways?
Yeah.
Or has that come from Whole Foods? Has that come from?
Yeah. Is there enough veg in there?
So what do you do? Like, how would you get someone who, because we're saying about calories, we're saying about macros, and we're saying that people just want to know that. But what if that's not an approach for someone? What if counting calories for me, like, and I say this, I've got my own opinion on this, but someone comes to me, I don't have the energy to track my calories, I don't have the time, like, it's too much effort, I don't really know what I'm doing, like, I just want to be able to kind of eat something and like be okay with what I'm eating. Like, how do you start someone like that? Someone who doesn't want to track anything.
Yeah, well, so I would just kind of look at,
because this is where behavior comes into play.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So I would first of all need to consider what's their daily activity like. Like, are they really active? How hard do they train? Like, what kind of training do they do? In terms of, do I need to support that lifestyle? With what's the adequate amounts of energy that I need to give them to be able to support that lifestyle? And from that, I would then provide them with some guidance on, well, if you don't want to track, let's make sure each of your meals look like this. So as an example, I might say to some clients, you're going to eat 3 meals a day, and across those 3 meals, in 2 of those meals, you're going to have a high quality protein source, you're going to have a high quality carbohydrate source, and you are going to have some vegetables. In the other meal, you are going to have a high quality protein source and some vegetables. And that's probably the guidance I would give most of the general public.
So, but that as a general rule, if you just took that as a general rule and just gave it to everyone, that would be a really good way to start.
Yeah, but you could also still get that really wrong. Like, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, I could give that advice to somebody, and if they don't understand how many calories are in food, you can still get that incredibly wrong.
Yes. And this is where I find with these things, it's a build up over time when it comes to your diet of just like wrong mistakes, or I don't want to say wrong, but making, and I don't really want to say mistakes, but making decisions based on your needs at the current moment and the current time. Your cravings for food, your hunger, the fact that you like want an ice cream, or you've been offered cake, or you've done these things, because they're not wrong, they just have a different purpose. And what I mean by that is, when you're out with your family and your friends and there's an ice cream van and you buy an ice cream, you get joy out of that, there's enjoyment there. And like the food there doesn't necessarily, you're not eating it for the calories, you're not eating it for the macros, you're eating it for the joy that it brings you to be with people and do that. But when you start to eat food for the value, or understand the value is not just for the enjoyment, then you start to get somewhere, because these decisions you make based purely on enjoyment could be the thing that starts to lead you down a bad path. And making decisions on, right, I need XYZ, I need protein, fats, carbs to fuel my body, because that's what it is. Like we said at the start, it's a unit of measurement, and calories is what we use. Calories are our diesel, calories are our fuel source. Where do we get them from is extremely, extremely important. Like, calories are equal when it comes to how much like fuel they give you, but they are not created equally. So when Mark says veg, a really good protein source, a good carbohydrate source, it's completely like having chicken, rice and broccoli is completely different to having like ham, chips and peas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the reason I give some of that guidance is because if we just take most of the population, again, this is obviously a really blanket statement. There's 60 odd million people in the UK. Right? This is a real blanket statement. But with most people that I've worked with, they don't consume enough water, they don't consume enough vegetables, and they don't consume enough protein.
Literally everyone.
Yeah. Now, I am not demonizing carbohydrates. I'm not saying carbohydrates are bad, and I'm not saying we should remove carbohydrates from people's diets, because that isn't true. You can still lose weight using carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a great fuel source to provide you energy to be able to perform exercise. But the reality is, carbohydrates are really readily available for most people. They're very easy for most people to overconsume, and they are a challenging food for a lot of people to be able to control. So there is probably going to be time periods where applying some restriction to those carbohydrates is going to be beneficial for some people.
Yes, because this is where it comes down to your relationship with food. This is not necessarily about demonizing anything. Like, you could go on a vegan diet, you could go on a low fat diet, you could go on a low carb diet, you could do a carnivore, you can do any type of diet. The biggest thing is why you're doing it is because if you're going to go on a low carb diet, do you have a really bad relationship with carbs? Are you going to sit there, nail a pizza, eat like a whole bowl of ice cream and start to really overconsume on that? Because it's so easily done. And creating this relationship with food and finding a diet strategy which is best suited for you and your kind of day-to-day life, or what you just prefer. Again, with everything, it's what you are going to stick to. It's what you're going to be able to kind of do for a long period of time. Because the one thing with successful people when it comes to tracking their calories for any type of reason is that they are ruthlessly consistent, and it's not about the quick return. We don't just go, right, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to start exercising for 6 weeks. Once that 6 weeks is up, I'm going to stop doing all those things. Because as soon as you do, you understand that when you do that, you're going to relapse and probably go far the other way. You're probably going to gain that weight back that you've lost, and then more so. And this is probably resonating for a lot of people, and it may be hitting hard a little bit. I'm just highlighting the fact that, yes, deciding a strategy which is going to work for you, whether that be tracking, whether that just be making sure you're having a good protein source, vegetables, and good carbohydrate source when you're having your meals, and kind of having rules that you stick to. If that's the strategy for you, that's brilliant. But then, are you going to stick to that strategy once your diet, in quotation marks, is over? Because that's the part that you want to think about, is longevity around what you're eating. If tracking for the rest of your life is not sustainable, well, now what do we do? So what do we do? How do you go about getting people to go from, right, we've tracked, we've started to understand where your calories are at. Now, how do I go around not just going from, right, I've tracked my calories, been eating really good, and we've gone way off the other end. How do we do that?
Yeah. So again, this is a conversation that I have a lot with clients, and it seems to be that when people kind of inquire about coaching and nutrition and that kind of stuff, and I have conversations with some people just like, oh, well, especially if they come from a competitive background, and I have conversations with them just like, oh, I'm a very all or nothing person. I got 100%. Yeah. I'm 100% in. You give me a food plan, you tell me exactly what to eat, and I would do it to the letter.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And then it's we're 3 days in. So how's it going? Oh, well,
Monday, I just wasn't feeling like it.
Yeah.
So that I said that I was on or off. Monday I was off.
Yeah.
And if you miss a Monday, well, I've missed a week. So I just decided I'm off this week.
Yeah, so start again next Monday.
Again. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I offer, and this is kind of going off topic a little bit, we'll come back to it, but the other thing I get a lot of when I get clients to do check-ins and stuff, I do sometimes get, and this gets nipped in the bud very, very quickly, but I do sometimes get messages like, oh, well, I've had a pretty bad week, so I'm not going to do my check-in this week. I'm just like, well, this is the very best week you need to do your check-in. I don't just want to see check-ins on good weeks. Yeah. What's that doing? So yeah, to answer that, to come back to that and answer that question a little bit, kind of trying to get people to understand that, do you know what? It's okay for you to have some ice cream. It's okay for you to have some cake. It's okay for you to have whatever it is, a burger, a pizza, whatever it is that you want. There are consequences to these actions. We have to potentially account for these actions. And make changes elsewhere to probably be able to allow us to fit those into our life. I think a lot of people come with a mindset of kind of, oh, I've got to drastically change my life. I've got to only eat chicken and broccoli for the next 6 weeks. But like you said, like, well, what are we doing after 6 weeks? Yeah. So it's kind of trying to, it's a bit cliche, but maybe trying to strike that balance of kind of like 80-20s. Like 80% of the time I'm eating really good stuff, but I'm allowing myself like 20% to have some chocolate, have some cake.
But I think that's a great rule when it comes to bloody everything you do in your life. And I genuinely mean that, because as we know, doing things kind of in moderation is really good. And for example, you get extremes in everything. Yes, we're obviously trainers, we're coaches ourselves, but the extreme of that is obsessing and doing like bodybuilding, for example, could be looked at as an obsession. We spoke about Johnny Wilkinson and how that could be an obsession with the amount of like dedication that he puts on something. Now, same thing comes to like when it comes to your nutrition. You could be so kind of anal with the stuff you're doing, and you could be tracking to the letter and doing all of this, but like there is a detriment, there is a kind of cost to doing all of these things. And like you say, when it comes to the food you're eating, you can eat whatever you want. Like, just try to understand that balance, that there is going to have to strike a balance. Like, if someone kind of took drugs all of the time, well, that's probably not going to be good for them.
Yeah.
But there are people that can go out and maybe take drugs, and I'd say 20% of the time, as in like they may take some drugs on a weekend, or they may go and do something like that. And obviously I'm not saying go and take a load of drugs, but what I'm saying is there are people that can manage it because they're doing things in moderation. Same comes for alcohol, same comes for training, same comes for every single thing you do. Moderation is really important, but having a structured approach on how you do things, like being really honest with your approach on how you do things.
Yep. So one of the things I actually did personally myself was when I was going through a period of tracking everything and trying to drop some body fat. Now, for those people that do know me well, I love chocolate. Like, I literally love the stuff. I will eat. You give me, I don't care how big the bar is, you give me a bar of chocolate, it's going. Like, it's going. I love chocolate. So, and I know that I know that I love chocolate. And it kind of comes back to, so let's talk of a conversation kind of like around willpower, because often I hear this like, I just don't have the willpower for it. Like, you don't need willpower. Like, willpower is not going to get you anywhere. We all have a breaking point. You don't need willpower. You need a better plan. Right. And a better strategy. So there's one strategy that I used was, I know for a fact that I love chocolate. If I was to really restrict myself from consuming chocolate for a week to 2 weeks as an example, maybe even longer, I know for a fact there's going to come a point in time in my life where I'm just like, forget this. I'm going to go to the shop and I am buying probably 4 family size bags of dairy milk buttons, and they're all going.
A classic example of on or off.
Yeah. So what I did was Monday to Saturday, I bought enough. Well, some of the days I just bought one a day, so make sure I didn't overconsume. But I used to consume 1 Freddo a day, because I know for a fact that if over a month's period, if I didn't do it every day for a month, but if over a month's period, I know for a fact if I consumed 1 Freddo a day, or you know the mega thin like dairy milk bars, like the really thin ones, or either Freddo or one of those, and I had one like every day, because I know for a fact the accumulation of those, if I was to total all of those up over a month period, it would equate to me eating less chocolate over a month than what it would if I just went and binged on chocolate.
There you go. That thing of having a strategy, because that's the thing. Without having that strategy, without having that game plan, you're just thinking, well, I will just hold out for as long as possible and I'll go on sheer strong willpower alone, but then you fall off the wagon and we're human, yeah? We understand that we all have cravings, we all have things we can't live without, we all have things that we probably know aren't too good for us. But that restriction, my biggest example of this actually is when we were in lockdown, and I say lockdown, I had to self-isolate from after catching COVID, and I was staying at my girlfriend's house. Her dad was vulnerable, so we couldn't leave our room. Now they have they had like a spare room that we could potentially go in, and we asked if we could go in it, and initially the answer was no. And I started freaking out, right? So I'm locked in this room and I'm thinking, I need to get out of this place. I need to get out of this place. This is really starting to stress me out. And as soon as they said to me, you can go into that room if you want to, I didn't need to go into it.
Yeah.
Because I had the option there.
Yeah.
And we are the same when it comes to your nutrition. Like, you don't necessarily, you'll find yourself not even wanting chocolate or not even thinking about it because you know you can have it. Whereas if you say to yourself, I can't have chocolate, fuck me, all the thing I'm going to be thinking about is I want chocolate. It's crazy how the psychology plays such a big role in this. And I think that's what you need to understand when it comes to creating a strategy on and working out what's going to work for you, because it is all individual, and it is like, well, how does my brain start to work this out? What do I need to be able to do this in a positive way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about finding those strategies that are going to allow you to keep it sustainable, be able to manage it over a longer period of time, and enjoy that process of seeing the changes that are sustainable and almost become easy. Like on those days where I knew for a fact that at some point in that day I could take a walk to the shop, I'm going to buy a Freddo, I'm going to be able to have this chocolate and enjoy it every single day if I wanted to. That made everything else in that day just be like, well, this is easy now, because it just didn't really feel restrictive.
But it's low-hanging fruit, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Would you say that's one of the things
100%
that people should do, is look at what are the easy things I could change?
Yeah, 100%. Take the low-hanging fruit every single time.
The reason that's good is tiny changes.
Yeah.
So, like, making the smallest change is, I know I've probably thrown about a million analogies into this one, but again, have you heard about the frog in water, right? You throw a frog into boiling water and it jump back out. If you throw a frog into water and then slowly turn up the heat, the frog doesn't realize the water's getting warmer, and it will like eventually die. Now that applies to us. If you start and make tiny little changes, you won't realize this is happening. 6 months down the line, you're like, shit. If you asked me to do that at the start, I'd have told you no. But if you now I'm at such a better place because these things haven't really changed my life. They've just been small little things.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing.
And yeah, absolutely. And they're the things that people need to focus on, rather than like people messaging me on Instagram going, what do you eat? What I eat has zero impact on your life. Yeah. Like, and is not going to help you achieve your goals.
So when I look at my diet then, when I look at what I'm eating, say I've tracked my calories or whatever, or say I've just written a food log and I've written out everything that I've ate on a daily basis, how would I go about making better decisions? Say my goal is just to stay the same weight, which is very rare, but we're going to use that one because it doesn't get used. Mm-hmm. Say my goal is just to stay the same weight, but I want to start to feel a little bit better. I want to start to probably make better choices, but where should I start? How do I do that?
Probably depends on where they're currently at in terms of, I would say maybe for some people, it's quite a difficult question to answer, because unless there's a real person saying, this is what I'm eating, what can I do better? But if I was to give a bit of a blanket statement, it would probably largely be around people's snacking habits. So what do they snack on throughout the day? Like, and I have some people who say to me like, oh, I don't snack. That's not me. I don't do that. And then they post pictures on Instagram of like a cup of tea and 5 biscuits. Just like, I thought you didn't snack. Like the amount of clients I've caught out on Instagram, they're just like, no, I don't, that's not me. I don't do that. And then 5 days later, I just screenshot their story and send it to them. Just be like,
what's this?
Didn't think you did this.
I had that. I've been eating really good. And then like puts up like a photo of them baking. And I'm like, oh, well, I didn't have any though.
Yeah. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Or just like, I only drink on weekends, and it's Tuesday night, there's a bottle of wine open.
And all of these things are absolutely fine. One of the things that you have to think about when it comes to your diet and when it comes to this is everything is like just complete honesty with where you're at. And when you do look at your diet, obviously the snacking habits, Jesus, people have like, it's really easy to overconsume when it comes to snacking because you don't really like you can easily, like you say, amount up to 500-600 calories just from snacks.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people's problem is they often plan. I see this a lot sometimes. People plan their meals, but people don't plan their snacks. So their snacks become quite emotional decisions.
Freedom.
Yeah, like they might be sat at their desk at work. They're just like, oh, they're a bit peckish. And they go to the staff room or whatever, and there's like a tin of biscuits. And they have 3 biscuits, which absolutely fine. But if you're doing that on a daily basis over a month's period, it's going to be a large amount of calories that you're consuming that you're not accounting for.
So planning your snacks and planning everything you're going to consume is the big thing. Like, don't just plan your daily meals, plan your snacks as well. And
then probably people making better choices around their snacks, because what I see a lot of is people just like, oh, I had a Mars protein bar. You basically just had a Mars bar.
Yeah.
So you could utilize those calories. You could make so much better use of them.
Which is why planning is really important, because like, don't get me wrong, that's probably a better decision than just having a Mars bar. But then like, I was going to do this actually. If you go in somewhere and you look at all of these things that say protein this, protein that, or like health bars, and you actually look at the calorie content, like a lot of them are really high.
Oh mate, some are like got 300 calories in. Do you know what I could give you? I could give you another meal.
Genuinely. And you'd be fuller and you'd feel better from it. But that's why planning it is so important, and actually trying to understand what you're putting in your body, because yes, making those decisions, that's a probably better decision than just eating like a kind of whole pack of Marylands. I miss that. I used to eat a whole pack of Marylands. You
did, mate. I used to go to shop for you like every other day.
Every other day.
Charlie, do you want for the shop? A pack of
cookies. Yeah. And it's not. And so making those decisions of, oh, I'll have a protein bar or whatever, is probably better. But as soon as you start planning out what you're having, your life just gets easier. That doesn't have to just be tracking, by the way. You can use other methods to work out how much you're eating. But like, tracking's obviously like the creme de la creme. And then just planning in general is going to be one of the a big rock that you need to focus on.
So like, as an example, going back to snacks, bear with me a little bit, but like, so I could, option number one is, now a lot of people are buying protein bars because like you can get, I don't know, like a salted caramel protein bar, you can get a cookies and cream protein bar, you can get chocolate orange carrot, like whatever, you can get every combination going of a protein bar. Now the reason people are buying this stuff is because they want something that tastes nice, probably tastes a little bit like chocolate. It's got some protein in it, so it's obviously good for me. Whereas, is there a possibility that you are going to adhere better to your diet and the food that you're consuming if some of these protein bars have got like 20 grams of protein? Like, I can give you 20 grams of protein split between 3 other meals just by increasing your protein sources. So I could increase your protein content really easily by doing that. And I could go to the shop, and for less calories, I could probably buy 2 Satsumas and a Freddo.
Yeah.
And I'd enjoy that more, because I'm not tricking myself and going, oh, I'm buying this protein bar because I really want some chocolate, but like, it's not really going to satisfy me because it's definitely not what I want.
Yeah.
But it's a chocolate protein bar, so it's obviously going to be much better for me. Whereas I could buy 2 Satsumas and I could buy a Freddo, knowing for a fact that the Satsumas are relatively low in calorie. They're going to give me much better vitamins than protein bar is going to give me. And then I get to have a Freddo.
Yes. So working out a strategy when it comes to your diet, when it comes to the whole point about this was behaviors versus the math of it. Like just asking someone for their calorie count, just asking someone to like sort their macros out is not the best thing to do, because like we said, the on or off thing, what happens when you're off of the diet is some people are completely off. So focusing on things that are really important, like having protein in like every meal is pretty much what I say. I
would say like one of the biggest things that people aren't doing is like they're just not consuming enough protein.
So if you've kind of got to this point and you're trying to work out how to plan your diet, the big rocks we want you to focus on: protein, like in every meal.
Yeah.
Would like, and it doesn't just have to be meat. It can be like whatever source of protein kind of is best for you.
Yeah.
And would you say when it comes to your snacking and things like that, how would you go around planning your snacking?
I guess one thing you could use is, and this was quite big a few years ago, and this is largely a lot of the stuff that I personally do now, just because I find it easy to do, is I try and avoid snacks that come in a packet.
I like it. I've never thought about that, but I like it.
So if it comes in packaging, I try and avoid it, which mostly means I'm snacking on fruit.
Which is probably the way I suggest things, is if you're going to snack on anything, snack on something which is protein based or is fruit, basically, is the way I say.
Yeah.
Or get rid of snacks altogether and just have another meal.
Yeah.
Like have a smaller meal. Have like a large chicken salad. Have something which you're going to get satisfaction from eating. So protein in every meal.
Yeah.
Veg source in every meal.
Yep.
Snacks wise, focus them on things which don't have packaging.
Yeah, that could be one example.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
So fruit, a protein based snacks, or just turn them into meals. Like snacks doesn't have to just be snacks. Have something which has protein, carbs, and veg in. Carbs and fats in. Plan your diet. Would you say that's another big rock for people?
Plan what? Sorry.
Planning your diet.
Yeah, I think so. Like I think, especially if you don't understand what you're consuming.
Yeah.
You don't understand how you're putting meals together in terms of what we've spoken about, in terms of protein in meals, carbohydrates and fats and vegetables in meals. I am just going to say vegetables are carbohydrates, because there'll be somebody who pipes up a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, veggies carbs.
But
yeah, I know that.
The difference is on that, like, and this really pisses me off. It's almost negligible having like tracking your carbs from veg. Yeah, obviously, like it's important, but it's almost negligible. Come on, like it doesn't matter.
There's going to be someone though.
I know, but it's just frustrating because that just highlights the problem. Yeah. That just highlights the fact that people concentrate on the wrong things. You're not concentrating on the behavioral habits. You're not concentrating on understanding what goes in your body. You're not understanding that you need to concentrate on having protein in every meal, focusing on having like veg in every meal, carbohydrates, not focusing on like planning your diet. What other things would you say someone needs to focus on genuine? So protein, veg, planning your diet.
Definitely consuming water.
So more, was it like 3 liters for a man?
Yeah, I would say like try and get a good 2 to 3 liters in a day.
Yeah, so 2 to 3 liters of water a day. Plan your snacks and like plan your diet. We talk about every single part of your diet.
Yeah, I would like, if you're really wanting to start making some good quality changes, taking it seriously, I would really start to pay attention to what it is that you're consuming.
That's probably a better way to think about it. Rather than planning, pay attention, because if you've got that 200 calorie buffer, if you have tracked, then you can let yourself be a little bit spontaneous when you fancy something, when you do have a craving, because you've got that buffer. Still take that into account though. Still kind of
absolutely
understand that that's what you've done.
Yeah. And like I say to my clients, just like, right, there's a 200 calorie buffer, but it's there to be used if you feel like you need it.
Yeah.
Don't just think, oh great, yeah, I can have 200 calories worth of minstrels every day.
So that's the thing, is these decisions come based on the psychological aspect and come on your ability to focus on the long-term goal or the goal that you want. And this gets me onto the point actually where the difference between health and tracking, like the math versus the behaviors, the math versus actually what goes into doing these things is almost like doing it for like the aesthetic reasons and doing it for the health reasons. If you are doing it for health reasons, you are likely doing those big rocks. You are likely eating protein because you know it's good for you. You are eating a veg source because you know it's good for you. You are getting good carbohydrates because you know they're going to fuel you with energy. You're drinking water because you know it's good for you. You're doing these things to benefit your health. Whereas if you're tracking your calories and you're being really anal about that and you don't care where they come from, you're doing that probably for the point of looking better. Not necessarily a bad goal, because that's something that I prize like highly, but I still chase health. You still have to be healthy. You don't want to sacrifice your health for the way you look.
Absolutely. Like I could give you a calorie target and a macronutrient target, and you could hit that without consuming a single vegetable.
And this is why the behaviors are so important. Is there anything like psychologically you think people like could do with thinking about, or just concentrating on a little bit more? Is there anything that way? Like, just because I know that the ability to be able to kind of focus on the long-term goal is the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to, if a lot of you are getting into looking at your diet, if it's for a health reason, brilliant. The long-term goal there is you want to be healthy. So let's focus on what do I need to do to be healthy. Using that 80-20 rule is a really good thing to do. 80% of the time I eat things I know are really good for me. 20% of the time I just kind of enjoy myself a little bit and do the things that are good for me mentally, right? Do the things that allow me to do that 80% almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then mindfulness, being aware of what you're eating, I suppose, being aware of the habits you've got.
I think that's really the big one. Like, so many people just aren't aware and they're not mindful of what they're consuming. I think that is probably a really solid place for a lot of people to begin.
Look at cinemas, right? You get a big thing of popcorn and the movie hasn't started and you're like,
yeah, it's gone.
Finished my popcorn.
Nailed it.
That is what we talk about when we're talking about mindfulness. Be aware of what you're eating, and start to understand the habits that you have. If you sit in front of the TV and you nail a chocolate bar just by sat there in front of it, go out to the kitchen, take a piece of it, eat it then and there, and leave the chocolate bar there. Yeah. Because you have to start to understand what your habits are and what's likely to make you fall off the wagon as such.
Yeah, and I would say one way that you, like, going off that example that you've just given, one way that people can become mindful about what they're consuming is to, when they are consuming food, whether it potentially be a snack or certainly when it's a meal, is like actually sit down and eat your food away from distractions. There are so many people nowadays who they probably they eat their lunch whilst they're sat at their desk working. They eat their dinner whilst they're sat on the sofa watching TV. So there's always another stimulation that's going on in their mind that's probably at that moment in time a little bit more engaging than the food that they're consuming. So for example, they're writing emails and they're dealing with work in the office, or they're watching a TV show that they really enjoy. And that's right in that moment in time, you're not being mindful of what you're consuming. Whereas if you turn the TV off, you sit there, you eat your meal, you either go out for a walk and find a bench or something to eat your lunch, like just get rid of all other distractions and focus on that meal in hand. You will be way more mindful about it, because there are so many people who I had conversations with clients, just like, right, well, what did you have for lunch? It's like, oh, I can't really remember. I was at my desk working and I actually don't know. Like, people just don't know what they're consuming. It's kind of like, it's like you take your bank account as an example. If you're going to start making big transactions and large payments to stuff, like, you're probably going to give that stuff some thought, rather than just being like sat there on the sofa buying, I don't know, spending 500 quid at Nike or whatever, and
not having any idea what's going on.
Yeah, and then, like, you know, the DPD guy arrives, just like, oh, what's this? I don't remember ordering this.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
But that being unaware is really bad. And like another thing you need to think about when it comes to the psychology of it is we've spoke about goal settings on a previous one, and we spoke about not actually focusing on the end goal. And the reason that is because if you focus on that end goal, if you don't reach it in the time frame you've kind of set, maybe it was unrealistic in the first place, but you're probably not going to think that. You're probably going to think that the problem's kind of set with you and you're the reason why this hasn't worked. And we're probably more likely to be more negative about ourselves and more negative about the thing we're trying to do. So that already puts a connotation with trying to lose weight or trying to gain weight or trying to do whatever we're trying to do. Whereas if we focus on being healthy and the results and the goals we set are, I'm going to eat fruit for every snack I have. How much of a success do you feel when you have that, right? And it is those little things for me which really start to change the psychology of it. It starts to become a difference from being on or off a diet or a difference to being good and bad. And that's why I didn't want to use that term earlier, was because nothing is wrong. Just understand why you're doing it. The reason you get satisfaction from having fruit for every single snack you've had is because then when it comes to Friday and you decide you want to have a beer, you can do that in the knowing fact that you haven't just ruined your whole week by eating whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
Satisfaction in the short-term goals or in every single goal you set and having attainable goals is basically what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anything else when it comes to the psychology of it? I know like limiting stress can be a factor when it comes to the amount we eat, because a lot of times if we eat on emotional decisions and things like that.
So emotional eating is a big thing, isn't it? Like a lot of people know that they probably know that they're a bit of an emotional eater and they turn to food as a bit of a comfort source. For some people that might be a bit more of a like a truly psychological issue, and it might be on another level away from nutrition. But for those of you that aren't, then yeah, like it likely is, because kind of like some people use food as a bit of a reward to make themselves feel better based on the fact that they've had a pretty rubbish day or a pretty rubbish week. Just like, oh,
we'll have a takeaway this weekend.
Yeah, like, or, you know, driving home from work, I've had a crap day, I'm just going to get a kebab and just like, it's going to make me feel better. And, you know, the first 6 bites are going to make you feel better. And then you're going to feel like crap again because you've just eaten a kebab, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
Now I feel worse.
Yeah.
Emotional eating. I do it. I think I think a lot of people do it in some way, shape or form.
I was going to say, I think probably everybody to a certain extent does that.
I don't think there's anyone, like people who wake up and have a coffee first thing, like I do that. And again, that's like an emotional thing. It's just like a habit that we kind of have in our day-to-day life. But I guess the main thing for you to think about and like kind of leaving this podcast is probably, what do I need to do and what do I need to focus on? And like we said, it's the big rocks. It's understanding like who you are and starting to really kind of be accountable for that. Be accountable for the decisions you make. And like we've said on previous podcasts, if we don't know where you are, we don't know where you're going, and we don't know how to get you there. So your best bet, maybe if you're not going to track, is to start to at least write a food diary and start to work out what you do eat. Because then you can start to make a plan going forward, and you can ask yourself those questions. Do I have a good protein source? Do I eat veg? Like these simple questions, and start to work out how much water do I drink during a day? Or do I just drink Coke every single day? Because a lot of people do that, and you're not alone if you are one of these people. So making sure you're focusing on the big rocks, making sure you're focusing on veg, making sure you're planning your diet, because that is just such a good strategy for going forward. And make sure you give yourself a sustainable approach and give yourself the enjoyment of food that comes from it, because we do get joy from food. Food is amazing if you get it from the right places, and it can be set as a reward, but try not to have it as being a reward for like a punishment almost. Try not to have it, I've had a rubbish day, so I'm going to do this. Almost have it as a reward of, I've ate really good all week, so I could have it, but it's accounted for, it's planned for, it's understood that that's going to happen. Anything else, Mark?
I think just to finish off, like going off some of the stuff that you just said, if people don't want to track and aren't interested in that, the best place to begin with, rather than focusing on calories to a certain extent, would be to focus on the quality of the food that you consume, which is like what you spoke about earlier. Ensure that you are consuming high quality foods. So like high quality protein sources, high quality carbohydrate sources, high quality vegetables, lots of water, because the reality is like they're going to be very nutrient dense. So you're going to probably not over consume some of those, because you're going to struggle to, because the amount of nutrients that are in those foods. And again, because they're very nutrient dense from a health point of view, they're going to massively benefit you. So if I was to give advice for somebody who doesn't want to track, just like, right, well, let's just focus on food quality.
Almost that snack thing that you said about packaging, similar thing. Don't go for really processed foods.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think this is the thing when it comes to just give me my macros. You're looking at it from a pure numbers point of view, and you aren't looking at it from what has got me to this point to need those macros. Because you've made decisions, you have been unaware, you've done maybe you've decided to be unaware, and you've just decided that there's habits and there's behaviors that have got you to this place, and you're not going to deal with them. We're just going to go straight to like, I don't know, the kind of fifth step. Do you know what I mean? And you're missing out these other steps of trying to work out why you do this. Is it because you're emotional eater, or is it just because you don't plan? Yeah.
So I get messages where people are just like, how much protein do you eat?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
How is that going to help you?
What is going to help you? Start to work that out. Start to work out what is going to help you and what you need to succeed. What are you currently doing which is probably detrimental? What are you currently doing, or what are you not doing, which could help you? That's one of the things. Because what are you not doing, and what could we start doing? A lot of times I'm more likely to add things into people's food than I am to take away, and I've learned that from other people. But chucking in things like veg into people's meals, like I'm adding food, but the likelihood is they're probably gonna stop like over consuming on other things because they're full up from the amount of veg they're eating. Just make better decisions and start to work out the behaviors behind it. It's far more important than the math that goes into it.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you do have any other questions, if you want to give Mark some abuse, actually, because as we all know, broccoli, vegetables, they are carbohydrates.
Or if anybody wants to send me chocolate.
Or if anybody wants to send Mark chocolate, you can find out his home address if you email us and you want to ask any questions, you want to get in contact with us, email us at info@realcoachingradio.co.uk. If you want to find Mark, you can find Mark on Instagram, Mark Origin Series, or you can go to Charlie RJ Hacker to find me on Instagram. We also have an Instagram for the podcast, real_coaching_radio. So go to those places. If you can't find them, then they will be in the show notes. You can find them there. If you have any questions or you do want to get in contact, please by all means go to those places I've just mentioned. But again, just to leave you with, make better decisions. Start to work out where you are and where you want to be, and what are the things that is going to help you get there. What are the decisions that you can make which are sustainable and can give you a long-term approach. If your goal is to gain weight, then gaining weight's great, but what do you do once you get to your goal? And this is why people talk about fitness as a lifestyle, because it is not necessarily what do I do to get from point A to point B. It's what do I do along this journey which is going to make it sustainable, going to make it enjoyable, and going to give me the best opportunity to enjoy everything I do, as well as being healthy, as well as looking good, as well as doing all the things that fitness can do for us. So just make sure that you focus on the big rocks. Make sure you understand that decisions that you make are far more important than the math that goes into it. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been Real Coaching Radio. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the podcast. We are on episode 10. If you have listened to all 10 episodes, you need to find something better to do with your time than listen to me and Mark rant, if I'm honest with you. But we are obviously appreciative of you listening. Hopefully we can help you if you're a coach or if you are just someone who's looking to improve your own training, your own nutrition, get a bit more information. And you like the way my Bristolian accent sounds, then thank you so much for tuning in. Whatever other reason you're tuning in for, thank you again for tuning in. And we just wanted to let you know that if you are looking for any more information, maybe you want help with your own nutrition, you can go to origin-series.com and Mark runs nutrition there. You can sign up for different nutrition packages. I myself run nutrition as well. I've just recently started doing it, and it's been really quite interesting to see how difficult nutrition is for people compared to training. Training can be difficult, but once people kind of get on the path of training, they stick to it pretty well. Whereas nutrition, there's a lot more emotion that seems to go into our food choices. Now, if you do want to just learn a bit more about nutrition yourself, Origin Series also has an education side, and in the education side there is a set of lectures, basically a package you can buy called Nutrition 101, and on there you can go through basically what's needed for whatever goal you're trying to achieve. Nutrition for performance, nutrition for muscle building, nutrition for weight loss, and many more different reasons that people could want to look at their nutrition. Maybe it is purely for health reasons. So have a look at that, check those two things out, and if you do want any more information, like I said, just email in info@realcoachingradio.co.uk. Thank you so much once again for sticking us through these 10 episodes. We'll see if we can get 10 more out and not kind of kill each other in the process. I think Mark's probably getting fed up of me asking him a million questions, but hopefully you guys are getting some benefit out of it as well. Thank you once again for tuning in. My name's Charlie. Oh, and if you can write in and tell me how many times I've said tuning in this outro, that would be great. Yeah. This has been Real Coaching Radio.